Hello, welcome to Hollywood Crime Scene. This is Rachel Fisher.
Hi, this is Desi, Jedeikin. Well, it's October, and we all know what that means. Horror movie versus reality. We already got started a bit with Poltergeist, correct? And this year, that also means we're doing a long requested case, and that is Jim Jones and the People's Temple, the Jonestown Massacre. So I have often thought to myself, how are we going to get to Jonestown? And luckily, there is a movie inspired by the case. This is the 2013 found footage horror film written and directed by Ty West. It is about two Vice journalists who document their coworkers' attempt to locate his sister after she joins a Jonestown-like religious commune. Like Jonestown, it also ends in mass murder suicide. So it's pretty much... Did you see this movie?
No.
Anyway, much like Jonestown, people often call this a mass suicide, but the truth is it's also a mass murder. Certainly the children were forced to drink the poison, or at least unknowingly just did what their parents were telling them to do. Obviously, many people were shot when they refused to drink the poison. But clearly there were some true believers who willingly, after a long period of indoctrination, went along with it. And this is definitely an interesting debate to get into in a later episode on this case. When it's all going down, we can discuss it further. There is a history of mass suicide, so it's not something that never happens. Many times a mass suicide event is something that happens during war. When one side is facing certain defeat, they resort to plan B rather than be captured by enemy forces, including thousands of suicides that happened in Germany when Hitler was finally defeated. During the final days of the Battle of Saipan, over 1,000 Japanese citizens died in mass suicides, throwing themselves off of Suicide Cliff and Banzai Cliff.
I've been to both of those cliffs.
You didn't jump.
Well, no, Desi, I did not jump. I have been there, though.
90 women committed mass suicide by drowning themselves during the partition of India. And we obviously have other cults like Heaven's Gate, the Solar Temple, which were both in 1997. And most recently, in 2023, April, 110 dead bodies were found in the Shakahola forest in Kenya. Rescued survivors stated that they had been ordered to starve themselves to death by Paul Mackenzie, leader of the Malindi cult. As of July of 2023, that death toll rose to 428. So it's still like something that's happening. Obviously not that frequently, luckily.
Thank God.
But the Jonestown case has really captured the attention of many people and remains a story that haunts people to this day, including me, who saw a TV movie back in the day. After Saturday cartoons, there were these TV movie of the weeks that started playing immediately, and they were almost always true crime oriented.
See, this is the great thing about growing up in the 80s and 90s is like, as a child, you would just like end up watching something really fucked up right after cartoons.
I would just watch TV all day. It didn't matter what it was.
I know.
I think that's how many of us were raised. And it is a sad relic that I actually think benefited us because we know a lot of crap.
We know a lot of crap, whether useless or not. To me, the crap that I know, not all of it is useless.
I think a lot of it's important.
I agree.
To have a cultural history and like knowledge, working knowledge, getting references, all of that stuff.
This is why we say open the schools.
Open the schools. Put back I Love the 80s on TV and those type of shows. So this is also the other one I watched during this period was Helter Skelter. And these were both old. It wasn't like I was watching primetime television. They're just like, let's throw this one on. And that's probably part of the reason I became a dark, weird child, now adult, although not the only reason for sure. So my sources are a Hulu documentary called Cult Massacre, One Day in Jonestown. I watched a few other off and on A&E type documentaries on the subject, those like American Experience. But it's a lot of stuff. Nothing new was coming in from any of those. But most importantly was the book Road to Jonestown, Jim Jones and the People's Temple by Jeff Gwynne. And this is something I actually bought in Point Reyes for summer reading. This summer, I just bought it. I was looking for a book to read and I saw it and I was like, that looks good. Maybe I'll do a case. I'll do this case at some point. I'll have this book. But here I am doing it now. So How did we get to what happened at Jonestown? Let's start at the very beginning, the early days of the cult leader, Jim Jones. So to understand Jim Jones and how he became who he was, it's very important to understand his parents, in particular his mother, who was a handful to say the least. Now, the way she described her life was that she came from a privileged background, married once to a very cruel man who, along with his family, treated her poorly, became a devoted advocate for prison reform and unionizing workers at the local glassmaking plant. She gave birth to a great man who became that way due to her nurturing and influence. On top of all of that, she broke down the social norms at that time that said a woman couldn't be a certain way. Well, needless to say, all of this is a lie. This is her invented story. Lynetta, as she was known in her later years, was more into fabricating a great life than getting off of her ass and living one, which I kind of, I'm on board. I can be on board with that. I get it. It's hard to live a great life. She's born Lunett Putnam in an undecided year because she also lied about that, but it ranged.
Lunett?
Yeah.
So she made her name more, she yassified.
She changes it a few times. Okay. So it's real country initially. Her birth date is also unknown. It ranges from 1901 to 1908, so it's probably 1901. She claimed to have Cherokee blood, but of course there's no confirmation of that. And she actually came from modest means. But in her teenage years, her ambitions far exceeded her desire to work hard for anything. When money didn't just fall into her lap, she turned to spiritualism and a belief in reincarnation. If she couldn't be a great woman in this life, at least she could talk about how she was one in a past life. And she did that. She was an attractive girl. So Lunett eventually takes the old-fashioned route to getting money. She gets married. This marriage ends very quickly, and she establishes a pattern. Mary takes a job, realizes it's not for her, gets married again, and she does this 3 times before rethinking her plan. She needed to marry into a family with prestige and money, and then she found him in James Jones. Now, James Jones was from a wealthy, prestigious family, but he was the loser of the family, which is honestly a smart tactic. Find the loser of a very wealthy family and get him.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Exactly. That's where that's your in. You got to get the ugly one, the loser, something. With no real ambition, he joins the military and fought in World War I. But unfortunately, he came back disabled after suffering a chemical war attack, which pretty much ruined his lungs. He was a disappointment to his father. And upon his return from war, he relied on their support to supplement his meager income, which included occasional manual labor jobs and his military pension. His family had no hope he would ever marry and were shocked when a woman, now going by Lynette, eventually Lynetta, she's in a transition phase. Lynette, she's trying that out now. They're like, she's going to marry him because he's old enough to be her father. But Lynette was not picky at this point. She was going to marry the family loser, get entry into the good life, and finally achieve the money and respect that she deserved. Unfortunately, she couldn't have been more wrong for how it would turn out. Now, James's family did help them out with a down payment so they could purchase a modest home on some farmland. They were expected to be self-sufficient and work this farm for income. But James's health deteriorated even more, and he became almost 100% unable to work at all, which led to depression for him and misery for Lynetta. This was not how she saw it going down. She's like, I don't want a leg up and then work. I want you guys to take care of everything. And I have a life of leisure. So I get it. She's irritated. This family is just not throwing money her way. And Lynetta, initially, she has no maternal instinct. She doesn't even want kids. But she tells this story later on that at some point she became severely ill, had a high fever, and it was in this fevered state that she had a vision. First, she was approaching the Egyptian river of death. As she was about to cross and die, the spirit of her mother appeared, telling her she should not cross because her destiny was to give birth to a great man. Soon after, she announced she was pregnant, and on May 13th, 1931, James Warren Jones was born. Now, after the boy's birth, Big Jim, as he's now called, had a nervous breakdown from the stress of it all. It was hospitalized for months, and this would be an ongoing thing, in and out of hospitals. Soon after that, things got worse when the farm was foreclosed on. Big Jim's family did step in, and they basically bought them a shack in nearby Lynn, Indiana. They informed Lynetta that while the baby was a toddler, they would support her, but once he was in school, she was expected to get a job. Otherwise, they would cut off this minimal support they were giving her. Now, the town of Lynn kind of embraced the Joneses. Initially, as I mentioned, they are a prestigious local family. But she's a fucking snob, and she really turns people off. She didn't want to trade pie recipes and decor ideas. She wanted to talk progressive politics and reincarnation. These were, these kind of things extra offended these, like, locals, because the snubs, like, they were like, you can't even decorate your house nicely and you're not talking to us. Like, they were super offended because she didn't even cook. Who was she to judge?
She needs to move to Topanga.
I mean, I'm kind of with her, but I also, it's like, you can like all of those things, be a snob and still like making pie. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. So I'm sorry. She even got irritated with his family because at some point, you know, she has no choice but to socialize with them since they're basically subsidizing their life. In particular, she would get annoyed that they called her Lynette still after she had decided to change it to Lynetta. But she also had never told them. Oh. She kind of just expected them to know and then got mad about it. So Big Jim's health deteriorates even more. He looks like hell. He looks way older than he is. And people in town start calling him Old Jim, which is... that's insulting.
You don't want to hear that.
Her only enjoyment in life is going into town and causing a scene by wearing pants, smoking, and cussing. She says hell, damn, and sometimes bullshit, according to locals. So she's really pushing the limits there. Perhaps the biggest scandal, though, is that this family does not go to church. So that's like, that really sets the town off because everyone goes to church. When little Jimmy finally hits school age, she gets her job at a nearby glass factory, and her son has pretty much free reign, and people start getting their first experiences with the odd boy, who becomes such a weirdo that he makes his parents seem normal. Now, Jimmy literally has no supervision. His mom works all day. His dad is either hospitalized or hanging out at the local social club playing cards and drinking soda. Sometimes he would be found wandering around town naked. And he's...
From soda?
No, the Jim Jr.
Oh, the boy. Yeah, I thought you were talking about the dad.
He would get drunk on soda and be like, hey, play with my Willie. No, he's like wandering around town naked.
He's like a free-range child.
Yes. And people feel bad for him because he has no choice but to wander around because his mom has a strict rule that he's not allowed to be at the house until she's home from work. He's a child.
Well, he doesn't have a babysitter?
No. So he just wanders around until she comes home from work and has to entertain himself. He's like 5 or 6.
Oh my God.
So he would just wander around Lynn, and everyone's like, he's so helpless and lonely. Almost every old lady in town at some point took him in. They were all like, oh, come here. Have a butterscotch. He had a remarkable ability to always bond over something with each person who took him in. If they liked flowers, he liked flowers. If they embroidered, he would take up embroidery. One father and son picked him up on the side of the road one time, and he found out that dad was a pilot. So he's like, I love planes. I want to be a pilot. So he was like making these connections. And honestly, like, I kind of get this mentality as a kid who's always trying to get people to take you in. Not that I had this exact same experience, but you are trying to be this relatable, easy child. Mm-hmm. So, you know, he was trying to be useful to them or something, you know, acceptable to be around. One woman in particular took a liking to him. Her name was Myrtle Kennedy, and she was the wife of a Nazarene pastor. So obviously Jimmy's next obsessive interest would be church. Now, Myrtle was described as a scarecrow of a woman, very self-conscious of her 6'2" frame. She was devoutly religious. The Nazarene faith is be Nazarene or go to hell. Those are your two options. So they're extremely evangelistic. They're trying to save souls. They're also very conservative, no drinking, cursing. They dress very modestly. They definitely wear a shirt under their sleeveless shirt, sister wife style.
Right.
They're not showing any skin. And even though she's kind of a zealot, she is truly sort of walking the walk. Like she does want to help people. She sensed Nazarene potential in Jimmy and started teaching him about Jesus, giving him a Bible, and eventually starts taking him to church with her on Sundays. Now, Lynetta didn't give a fuck. Even though she wasn't religious, she's like, oh, thanks. Take him I have a day off. I don't want my kid around. But she also makes sure her son knows that church is bullshit and there is no God. She's like, spiritualism, reincarnation, that's fine.
Right.
But, go to church. Just don't start believing that crap. Now, Jimmy loves church. He is particularly infatuated with the pastor and his hold on the congregation. He starts quoting Bible passages and begins emulating the style of preachers when he speaks sometimes. And Myrtle is thrilled that she saved this godless soul from eternal damnation. But Jimmy was not tied down to just the Nazarene church. He becomes curious about all the churches and eventually starts going to multiple services every Sunday.
How old is he at this point?
He's like 8.
This kid's busy.
He's like, he knows what he wants. Like, I'll give him that. Like,
this is
from an early
crazy.
age, he's like, I'm planning things. So
he has like appointments.
I know. Can you imagine going to multiple church services? That
No.
sounds boring as hell. Although normally Myrtle might be like a little betrayed by this, Jimmy convinces her that he's just seeing what other churches are doing and how they err in their ways. So she's kind of like, oh, okay. So yeah. So as long as it's to kind of prove that the Nazarene is the one true way. Of all the relationships formed in his life, this is perhaps the only one that is truly loyal and real. He maintains a relationship with her the rest of his life or her life. And he kind of low-key credits her in many ways with putting him on this path. So just as Jimmy is seemingly conforming as far as becoming a churchgoer, he still stood out as being a huge weirdo. He just took everything too far. He got a lot of sympathy, as I mentioned, because his parents were so weird, but it wasn't enough to stop people from talking. Even though many kids went to church, obviously, no one was into it as much as Jimmy. One kid found him once in the forest all alone practicing preaching in the middle of the forest, and he was really creeped out because, like I said, he's like in 3rd grade doing this. That's a very weird hobby. But he's obsessed with religion and death. And many kids looking back were like, yeah, that dude was always a freak. When he realized there was a casket manufacturer in town, he was like, let's go. And he would go hang out in there after hours because they never locked their storage unit or whatever, the building. Eventually, he would organize field trips, inviting other kids and have them lie down in caskets to feel what it would be like to be dead. So he would have these field trips often, and kids started getting too scared and bailed on the field trips. But then he ups the freak factor and begins having animal funerals for roadkill. So he would find dead animals on the road and have elaborate funerals for them. This is also very RFK Jr. of him.
Yeah.
And he was like preaching at these funerals, and the kids his own age would start bailing eventually because they were so creepy. And that's when he would round up the younger kids to participate because they were like, cool, an older kid wants to hang out with us.
Yeah.
So he would just have these young kids. He would also claim to have unique abilities such as the capacity to fly. He once leaped off a building's roof to demonstrate this ability and fell and broke his arm. But he still would persist that he did have these exceptional abilities, except for that one time. At other times, he would put children into life-threatening situations and tell them he was guided by the angel of death. And he committed countless sacrilegious pranks in the churches he attended. He claimed that he had stolen the Pentecostal minister's Bible once and had covered Acts 2:38 with cow manure. This is a verse about repenting and baptism. He also said that once he substituted a cup of his own urine for the holy water at a Catholic church. Now, these are funny.
Well, so he's not doing this at the Nazarene church. He's doing this at the other churches he goes to.
So around this same age, World War II is obviously in full swing, and kids are playing war Everyone wants to be the Allied forces, but you'll never guess who was fascinated by the Nazis and Hitler, Rachel. Yes, it's Jimmy Jones. He was only too happy to take that side in these war playtime games. He didn't believe in Hitler's beliefs. He just liked Hitler's vibes. He was like, I love his style of speaking, the way he can persuade people to follow him.
Well, that can never end poorly.
No. And he's like, he gets these people to be so loyal, kind of like preachers. He studied Hitler's speaking style, the way he commanded the crowd, and just the dynamics of his voice.
That's sort of like a classic, is like these men today, whether they're like politicians or I don't know, like weird guys, they're like, I'm not saying I believe it, but he was very good at speaking.
Right.
Do you know those guys?
Yes. It's a very common, it's like, look, you got to admit he was really great speaker. And it's like, I actually don't think he's that great of a speaker.
And I also don't need to hand it to him at any point.
No one ever needs to hand it to Hitler. And it's a bad sign. But like, if we're just speaking honestly, I don't actually think I wouldn't listen to a guy who shouted like that. Like, I don't get Hitler's appeal as I'm not even, do you know what I'm saying? I don't actually think he's that appealing of a speaker.
No, like you like see that old black and white footage of him and like, you are so annoying.
I think it's I think he sounds annoying.
It's
like
so
maybe
irritating.
That appeals to people who are really angry. I don't know. I have no idea. I just don't think his voice is that, enticing to me.
I'm just saying that's a certain type of guy who's like,
absolutely.
I read Mein Kampf because it's very interesting. Like,
I want to educate myself on all points of view.
So it's always a red flag.
Yeah. So, like I said, the older kids do not want to be Nazis. So Jim once again gets his young kid, friends to play his inner circle. He even goes so far as to hit them with branches when they mess up their march. One childhood friend recalled that Jim shouted Heil Hitler and gave the Nazi salute to German prisoners of war who were traveling through their town on the way to a detention facility. So that seems like a little more than just admiring the speeches.
And he's like 10.
Yeah. So now, obviously, as we said, it's very weird to ever hand it to Hitler regarding anything. So that in and of itself is very weird, especially because we all know going into this, he's not just handing it to Hitler and his speaking ability. He will take other lessons and also use them for evil. So one thing about Jim Jones that everyone kind of agrees on is that he was highly intelligent. As a child, emulating successful people is oftentimes how you can become successful. So many people, have this opinion, like if only he used these powers for good, maybe he could have actually been a great man, but something was just off with him. And I say that knowing we haven't gotten to all of this yet. But at the start of his career, he really is all about progressive ideas, social justice, helping the downtrodden and seeing the people who felt unseen.
I think that's one of the most just bizarre and fascinating things about Jim Jones and the People's Temple was the fact that he did hold or at least he professed these views that are progressive, that you're like, yeah, that sounds great.
Well, I mean, he truly did believe them.
Right.
I just don't, obviously things go off the rails.
Something went wrong.
Yeah. And this is also sort of religious leader, cult leader. From an early age, he kind of also realized, find the people who are lost or looking for something. And at that time, Black Americans obviously were a group that needed help and wanted to have equal rights. So they were definitely searching for that. So they were a perfect group to go after for him. And he'll do that later. I'll get into this episode. But he was also very controlling from an early age. He even shot a friend of his with a BB gun when he didn't participate in one of his things. And that was like a personality flaw that would play out later on in many ways. He would feel personally betrayed if someone went against him with an opinion or dropped out of something that he wanted to do. And obviously at the end, it really plays out. So his mom really beefed up this ego in him. And she also beefed up this idea that look, if something fails, it's not your fault. It's the other person. You were chosen by God to be a great man. So fuck these people. One of his biographers suggested that he was so weird and unusual because he couldn't make friends. Obviously, he had other bad behaviors. He stole candy from merchants in town to give to friends. His mom would have to go pay for this because it was sort of a known thing. He also used offensive profanity, greeting friends with "Good morning, you son of a bitch," or "Hello, you dirty bastard." And people would get mad and tell his mom, and then she would beat him with a leather belt to punish him. He was trying to win people over, but also find a purpose. And what ultimately was the pull was watching people, whether it was a minister or a pilot, command respect and get positive attention. He saw these people as role models, pillars of society, and he wanted that. He just had no guidance on how to do it, and he had no role models at home, obviously. He claims that by the end of third grade, I was ready to kill. I mean, I was so aggressive and hostile, I was ready to kill. Nobody gave me love, any understanding. In those days, a parent was supposed to go with a child to school functions. There was some kind of school performance, and everyone's parents were there but mine. I'm standing there alone, always alone. So we'll leave it up there, and we have much more to get to after this break. So one summer, he goes with the Kennedys to Richmond in Indiana. It's kind of the closest big city to Lynn, and he's there for the whole summer break. It was there that he found a Pentecostal church and would attend services regularly, going up to be absolved of his sins and saved multiple times, which is something you normally do like once. He would do it almost every service. He was riveted by the performance involved in a Pentecostal service, and this is the healing, speaking tongues church, messy bitches who love drama. When he came back to Lynn, he also had another new obsession.
Did you just call the speaking in tongue messy bitches who
That
love
church is messy.
Wait,
they love drama.
The Pentecostal?
Yeah. What are they doing?
I mean, it is crazy to like watch a video of that stuff.
It's like it's like a WWF wrestling or something.
Insane. They're like on the ground. They're like laba laba. I can't even do it.
I can't even do it for fake.
It's like its own language.
No, it's wild. So he also comes back with another new obsession, sex. He became like an expert on sex, and people did ask, did you have sex? Is that why you were getting saved every week? And he's like, no, I was not. We also find out that Jim has a huge hog.
Wait, when do we find that out?
Right now, I'm telling you. In the book, this is where they mention it.
They say this in the book.
Yeah, and one of his favorite things to do was have pissing contests. Supposedly, he could manipulate his penis in such a way that he could piss so far he was unbeatable in a pissing contest.
Was everyone like, put your wiener away?
Yeah, they're like, the weird guy has his dick out again. He wants to just piss, do the contest, make him stop. Like,
yeah.
So he, we're moving into high school now. He settles into his weirdness more. He dresses up every day in his Sunday best to go to high school. And people are like, what the fuck? He's still holding his funerals and talking about Jesus a lot. He didn't like sports, though, because he didn't like losing. So he would he coached teams for the younger kids instead. Now, it's through sports that he really experiences firsthand some of the treatment the Black Americans who are in attendance at a baseball game he attends. He kind of sees this discrimination that's going on in front of his face for the first time. And he develops what people describe as a strong aversion to racism. Like, he is anti-racist. He's very against it. He argues, and Indiana at the time is like a Ku Klux Klan like stronghold.
Yeah.
It's like a huge area for that. So he's like pretty much alone on this one as far as like the white people in his area, including his dad, who he constantly argues with about all of this. And he like didn't speak to his father for many, many years because his father forbid one of Jones's Black friends from entering the home. Now, he is a good student. He enjoys debating with teachers. Of course, he's a debater. He develops that habit from his mom of not responding to anyone who spoke to him first, only engaging in conversations that he starts. So that's obviously incredibly weird behavior. Even though most people are like, he's so annoying, and stupid. They still kind of low-key find him fascinating, which I kind of get. Now, at home, things are not good. Old Jim is deteriorating mentally. He's not helping out. He's alcoholic now. He's off the soda and onto the sauce. Lynetta is becoming more and more furious because no one seems to be recognizing her greatness. It's been a while now, guys. Let's get on board. She's not a great mom, but she still gets pissed when people criticize her mothering. And she does the unthinkable for these times. She gets a side piece. And Jim knows about it and isn't mad because by that point he had taken his mom's side as far as the marriage went. And he also starts dabbling in romance. He's crushing hard on a girl named Sarah Lou. She had a boyfriend named Dick. And Dick threatens Jimmy, but Jimmy does not back down. Sarah comes home one day to find Jimmy talking to her parents who are absolutely charmed by him. And they're like, you got to go out with this nice young man, Sarah. Please date him. But Sarah is not giving up Dick. So Jimmy moves on to another poor gal. Now, in his teens, he begins preaching on the street corner. He would travel back to Richmond, the nearest big city I mentioned before. They had a sizable Black population, and that was where he was like really focused. He would preach equality, which, as I mentioned, in Indiana in 1940s, they weren't really hearing from any white people at the time. So they were very interested to hear this boy speak. He also recognized early on that choosing this route, focusing on these people, it was like his path to power. Mm-hmm. He's like, I truly believe in this, but it's also beneficial to me. It's basically what it is. So once again, we're back to the idea that he could have truly been maybe a great leader as far as the civil rights movement went, anything better than what he did. Now, an interesting quote.
The problem is that he wanted to be a leader so bad at the cost of actually doing what he was saying.
Right. I just would love to know in their mind what that conversation looks like. Because I'm sure they convinced themselves they truly are good initially, right?
What Jim Jones said to himself.
Yeah.
I'm sure he did believe his own bullshit and did think he was like the way.
Yeah.
I believe that he convinced himself. I'm just saying this guy is clearly something's like personality wise is like deeply spiritually sick with him that he feels like he's God.
No, it's crazy. Now, an interesting quote that Jim says later on in life is that he never was a true believer in God. He was only infiltrating religion in order to indoctrinate people into socialism. So he admits that he's an atheist, basically, doing all of this. So in 1948, Lynetta just leaves old Jim, and her and Jimba, which is what her nickname for him is, move to Richmond. Now, obviously, they lose the financial support of their relatives after the divorce. So to support him and his mom, after he graduates high school, he begins working at Richmond's Reed Hospital as an orderly. He is well regarded by senior management because he's a kiss ass. But of course, all his coworkers are like, this guy's weird. At that point, he's like, maybe I want to be a doctor, actually save some lives, not just this preaching shit. It's also good for his God complex still. He's really buying into his mom's prophecy that he has greatness in him. He's just really confident, and he begins dating a nurse in training named Marceline Baldwin. And she has similar great ambitions and has a deep desire to help others. He eventually moves to Bloomington, Indiana, where he attends school. He is initially trying to become a doctor, but he changes his mind after seeing a speech by Eleanor Roosevelt about the plight of African Americans, and he begins to really dive into communism and other radical political views, and he's kind of speaking out about it. He's not holding back anymore. They continue their relationship while he's in college, him and Marceline, and they eventually get married in June of 1949. Now, Marceline's family is devoutly Christian. They're Methodists, and they're like the Christians who are actually quite racist. You know, those kind. He's actually at a dinner with Marceline's family, and Marceline kind of glosses over what happened. She's like, yeah, they had an argument about interracial marriage, but the other version is that she's really going off with racial slurs, and it's pretty ugly. And he goes off on her mom at this dinner. And at the dinner, he says to Marceline in front of everyone, I'm leaving. You can choose between me and that bitch about her mom. But her family actually relents. Like, he is so imposing. They start agreeing to his point of view on race relations to keep peace, even if it's just fake. And they're just kind of like keeping it to themselves. So he's obviously refuses to compromise in any relationships, including his marriage. Marceline and him often fight about the Methodist Church because the Methodist Church is a segregationist congregation. They don't allow Black people in, and this puts a huge strain on their marriage. He also is like, I'll go to church, but I want you to know I'm atheist and you need to also be atheist. And she kind of tells him he needs to give up socialism because it's like warping his brain. And she's like, I'm going to leave if you don't. And then once again, he bends her to his will and she backs down on her ultimatum. Now, this is a great example of this softer side that he presents that actually ends up being sinister. And this is the first big example I came across. I mean, I guess there's other, but this one's really horrific. He has a special bond with Marceline's 10-year-old cousin who had been in and out of foster family because his mom is kind of like not having a great life. She's troubled. They take the boy in and the family is like, wow. Because I guess the family was just letting this kid go into foster care, which I think was more common back then. Like, now I feel like the family is like taking them in, but then they were just like, I guess he's in foster care. So Jim almost immediately teaches the boy about sex, though. This kid, his name is Ronnie. He would later say that he thinks if Marceline would go along with it, he half expected Jim would have demonstrated the things he was talking about with Marceline for him to look at. He said that Jim began talking poorly about his mother, calling her a whore, pressured him to call Jim and Marceline mom and dad. And Ronnie began praying his mom would get her life together and save him from Jim, who he described as two-faced. Yeah. He said he saw like the two sides of Jim Jones. So he does eventually go back to his mom, and they end up adopting a child from their church. And that's the first child that's in their, what they will describe as rainbow family. So he begins attending local Black churches at this time, and he really enjoys this more joyful environment and music. He thinks the people actually seem like they want to be there. It's not torture like he sees in these other churches he's attended. In 1952, he gets his first preaching gig at the age of 21 at a Methodist church. In March of 1953, he gets his first big press. A local boy made good story talking about his work creating a rec center for the poor children on Indianapolis's South Side. So Jim Jones gets sick of this stiff Methodist church he had been working at and wants to try his hand at revivals. He began studying the process, and before his first revival, he kind of goes and hangs out with the crowd. He meets the audience members. He starts memorizing facts that he's overhearing, taking notes, so that when it's showtime, he's able to use this information to blow people's minds. He's like John Edward. Yeah. Like, he's doing what like psychics do, like kind of spying and getting this information and then presenting it during the revival. So he leaves that first revival walking on air. People lose it over him. This is exactly what he wanted. And people just start talking, word of mouth starts happening about this new preacher who could prophesize. He had God-given powers. And Jim is a showman. So like we talked about before, revivals are like religious show business. So this is a match made in heaven. In 1954, he leaves the Methodist Church. Marceline and him claim that it's because Jim tried to integrate the congregation, but rumors were swirling that he had possibly stolen funds. But regardless of what the reason was, he takes this as a sign to start his own church, and he wants to do this in Indianapolis. This new church he was planning would be called Community Unity because everyone would be welcome. He focused on recruiting members in the lower income Black areas who liked what they were hearing from him about racial justice. Indianapolis was maybe not as bad as the South, but it was still a very highly segregated city. So this was an idea that many white people were not on board with, him doing this integrated type of church. And some were like, is this really needed? We have a lot of Black churches here that do that job. So what are you offering that we can't get there? Now, although Black ministers had organized in this way to kind of become this union to take on government and kind of fight with government about things to get their congregations things they needed, at some point they realized that while they had gained access to those in power, nothing was happening. They weren't doing anything to improve the lives of their congregations ultimately. They were kind of just like, yeah, listening, but then not fucking doing anything.
The government?
Yeah, the government was like giving them an ear, like listening to them, but then nothing ever happened because they didn't give a shit. Now, James has a solution for his dilemma. What can I offer Black citizens in Indianapolis that they can't already get from their wonderful churches? And it was being a Karen for them. So basically his church services at the start, very few people were there, maybe the most 25 elderly Black women who were there because they had some difficulty with the government bureaucracy. They were being threatened to have a service turned off or something like that. And Jim and Marceline would write letters to these like electric company or whatever to get this dealt with. The next sermon, that woman would stand up and say, "Hallelujah, the electric company has backed down and turned back my service." And it truly felt like a miracle for these people who were getting nothing from local government. Jim's pitch was, when you come to this church, you get something now. You don't have to wait to the afterlife. And that was a very appealing message. So week after week, the congregation grew. This white preacher wasn't just talking, he was walking the walk and getting things done. But Jim obviously wanted to do more. And in order to do that, he needed a bigger space. So he went back to the revival circuit, earning funds via collection plate. As his reputation grew, he was actually turning people away. Upwards of 1,000 people were showing up to hear him preach. Part of this new influx was that Jones was now doing healings at these revivals. So he had a major success early on. A young boy had a heart defect. He was diagnosed with a heart defect. Jim did a healing thing on him, and when he went back to the doctor, nothing was detected. But obviously it could have been a misdiagnosis, whatever. But Jones was also doing the classic healing trickery things like the cancer, coughing up chicken guts and saying that was the tumor that was coming out, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that shit's so weird.
And some of these people were plants, like obviously. And the people who did that believed in his message. They're like, a little trickery for the greater good is fine. It didn't matter, though. Eventually, he was able to purchase a building, which was a former Jewish temple. They celebrated this new space with a new name. Initially, it was Wings of Deliverance. But when Jones noticed that the building had the word temple carved in stone, the People's Temple was born. Now, there is no apostrophe in People's. And that's because he thought that indicated ownership. And one of the key temple goals was to discourage obsession with material things. Let's just say that flew out the window pretty quickly for Jim Jones, at least. This is very common with cult and religious leaders. They're always loaded, and everyone gives them all of their worldly possessions, and they are living this high life. Mm-hmm. But as the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and it seems like the story of the People's Temple and Jim Jones perfectly illustrates that. So that is part one. I hope you learned some new things. Next week, we will get into the early days of the People's Temple and their move to California and the beginnings of Jim Jones' descent into lunacy.
I love it. I did learn some stuff, Desi.
Oh, good.
I did not know much about his origin.
The early stuff. I feel like I don't hear that
years.
As much. And this book is good because it's so in depth. Like this was like only 100 pages into the book.
Wow. It's very illuminating.
Yeah.
Just to see him as a child and sort of the personality type and the early behaviors he exhibited that sort of go to show how he would end up on this path.
I agree. It's sort of what I always want to know. How did this happen?
How did this happen?
So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more into it. And it's going to be a few episodes before we're even in Guyana. I mean,
well, take your time, Desi.
I will take my time.
I think I have a feeling Halloween month is going to be longer than a month. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
We'll see what happens.